Alrighty, looks like we're live and kicking. So, first of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to the call. Just to help us from a logistics point of view, if you can type in "I can hear you" or "I can see you" in the chat box, that will let us know that you can. I suppose I'd like to welcome Nathaniel to the call. Today we're going to be talking about 9 things every salesperson must know about social selling. And I think it's one of my favourite topics for sure, and definitely one of Nathaniel's. Welcome, Nathaniel.
How are you doing out there, everyone, this morning? Thanks for joining us. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn about social selling. It's definitely something where we are getting a lot of questions and a lot of confusion in the marketplace. If any of you are on LinkedIn, you probably realize that your clients are on there and wondering what the best way is to engage with them in discussion. So that's really what we're going to be covering today.
Excellent. So for those who I haven't met before, my name's David Guest. I run a business coaching firm. I've been doing that for 15 years. One of my favourite areas is marketing. Social media has really turned marketing on its head. It's reinvigorated some of the older things. We'll be talking about that today as well. But the amount of people that I speak to that are really struggling with getting social media profitable has been interesting. So what I'm hoping is that we can clarify some of that mystique today. And having Nathaniel here, who is the LinkedIn expert that I've been working with for many years now, is really beneficial because he understands the technology of LinkedIn, and I'll be talking a bit about the sales process that's required.
Yeah, excellent.
So let's get started.
Okay, so first and foremost, we need to look at what social media platforms you need to be on, because we can all waste a lot of time joining up to all these different social media platforms, and we want to make sure that the ones we're using are the ones where our clients are. So if you're in B2B, as in your business targets other businesses, or you're in financial services or real estate where you target high net worth individuals, your target market is more often than not going to be on LinkedIn. There's 365 million members now worldwide, and the goal from the LinkedIn CEO now is to, by 2020, they're going to have 3 billion members.
And it's an interesting point you put there, Nathaniel. I think when we look at social media, there's hundreds of channels, and they just keep growing. There's more and more, and the question is always, which is the one that's going to work for me? And the answer is simple, and you just alluded to it. If your target market is on that channel, you need to be on that channel as well. And when you talk about high net worth individuals or business to business, no doubt LinkedIn is right up there. I noticed you got Twitter high up there as well. Is that the same in Australia?
Look, it is. It does require a huge investment of time, Twitter. It's not the same as LinkedIn where you could do a post a month and become like a leader in your industry. Twitter's literally, people are updating 5-6 times a day. So it just depends, what resources you have at your disposal. Normally, I think it's for bigger businesses that have, a full-time social media manager in-house.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the business model of LinkedIn and why it's structured the way it is. The business model that they have is basically what they call a freemium model, where you have a free membership and then you can upgrade to a paid subscriber. Now, if I looked at the business plan, I did look at the business plan when LinkedIn did its capital raising, and it was all about a recruitment platform. And I don't think what they realized at the time was there's actually going to be a much larger market of salespeople and entrepreneurs on this platform. So the business model is not really being designed with that in mind, and therefore, in order for salespeople to upgrade their account, they really can't offer training. So, like you have 15% of people on LinkedIn are actually paid subscribers that have access to training, whereas the other 85% don't. So a lot of people are wondering how to use this effectively, and it's very much just due to the business model. So if you're in sales and you learn how to use LinkedIn effectively, or you come along to one of the training programs, you'll realize that you don't necessarily need to have a paid subscription in order for you to generate clients through LinkedIn.
Right, it's true. When I started with LinkedIn, it was a resume online. It was a way that I could find employees because I could see their resume without having to put a job ad in the paper. They might not even be looking. And obviously what seems to be happening is it's turning into a social network where people are connecting. They've got groups that they're becoming members of. The thing I love about LinkedIn is I can actually find people that I would never have a hope in cold calling or making contact in any other way, and I can find out all about them, their hobbies, their interests, their history, all sorts of things.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the business side of it. So from a business perspective, people are using it to hire, to market their business, and to sell. So from a hiring perspective, the recruitment angle of LinkedIn is very much a big business game. Same with marketing. Like, in order to get LinkedIn support on a pay-per-click campaign, you have to be looking at about $10,000 investment per month.
Right.
Right, and on sales, obviously, we have the hurdle of the training. So a lot of people who are in sales can see that their target markets are on LinkedIn and not quite sure exactly how to approach them. And if they're a bit gung-ho, they may just go and add a whole bunch of connections until potentially they get a restriction on their account, but may not be doing it the most effective way that they can. So what we're going to try and address today is how to approach people, what sort of people you should be approaching, do you accept all connection requests, what sort of things do you write to people to get an opportunity, and that kind of thing. And we've got some really interesting statistics as to what works the best, and you know, what sort of strategies and systems you should have in place.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's interesting you say that people aren't trained to sell on LinkedIn. And the more research I've done on this and the more we discuss it, what I've realized is LinkedIn is just a channel. And the sales strategies that you use on LinkedIn are almost no different to traditional sales strategies other than the channel you're using.
Correct, yeah.
So it's really not about trying to sell your product or hard sell. It's really about building relationships, connections, communicating, educating, all these sorts of things. And we're going to break that down into specific components. But where do people start?
Well, I think that there's been a huge shift in the way that sales psychology occurs.
Yep.
And you know, we talk about B2B and B2C and these kind of things, whereas social media really just lends itself to people.
Yeah.
And so you really need to start by identifying who are the people within the organizations that you want to be developing a relationship with. And of course, you don't approach them as a company. You don't do it from your company page. You do it on the individual level.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to have common interests as your target market.
Yeah.
We'll go into a bit more detail in a minute, but there's a huge herd mentality in terms of like making buying decisions online, whereas, you know, in the old days there might be one decision maker, now there could be 6 or 7. So the whole buying cycle's changed, and if you're only approaching one decision maker, you could be missing out. So identifying who it is that you're targeting is probably one of the most key things.
Which doesn't sound any different to Marketing 101 from the 50s. Where people say, oh, look, should I advertise in the local paper? And the question was always, does your target market read the local paper? So it's exactly the same, and I think this is what sort of the biggest issue with social media is there's so much in front of you. You tap into this network, you've got millions and millions of users on there, and people go, wow, look at the size of this database, where do I start? And the answer is, before you even log in, you need to define who is the person that you want to make a connection with, what's their role, what's the company they work for, and then you can start tunneling in and finding the individual. Correct.
Alrighty, so just some key statistics here. I mean, this is some really important stuff to grasp. David, 75% of B2B buyers use social media to make purchasing decisions. Yep. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
I think it's getting bigger, you know, and it's a funny thing because whenever I talk about things like price competition in a market and the impact that social media has had on buying patterns, you watch people walk in a retail store these days and they've got their smartphone open and they're looking at products online. So they'll walk into a shop and they'll be looking at a washing machine, but they'll be doing research on that washing machine while they're looking at it. They don't trust the sales guy anymore, right? Because the sales guy is going to pitch you what's in the store. When they go online, they're not looking for the price, they're looking for the reviews. Okay, so when people go to social media, they're looking for what other people are saying or social proof to assist them in making a decision. And that's quite powerful because that's not the guy in the shop who's making commission. That's actually someone else who's used the product. So this whole idea of using social media to make purchasing decisions is about checking with your network, checking with other people, and really getting an opinion from someone who's hasn't got a vested interest in the sale.
So if you're in B2B and you're not utilizing social media as part of your marketing strategy, you can see how much you must be missing out on. And I think eventually, you know, these kind of businesses will just be left in the lurches because the ones that will thrive will be the businesses which add value.
Yep.
And you know, businesses with integrity, and the whole herd mentality is just going to get stronger and stronger. No different to, you know, TripAdvisor or Urban Spoon or any of these apps that we use to see where the herds are moving towards.
Yeah. And you're right, because look at what's happened with Uber. You know, that's an evolution, right? And it's actually taken nearly 10 years to come about from when it started. But now people are using Uber to get a cab, and they're relying on a person to pick them up who is unregistered by the government, right? They've got no cab license, but they're qualified by this third party, which is overseas. The thing they're really looking for is the success of Uber lies in the feedback mechanism. So if you get picked up by an Uber cab, you have to rank them straight away. Now, if that driver gets 3 ratings of less than 3 stars in a row, they don't get any more jobs.
Yeah. Well, they actually rate the customer as well. So it works both ways.
Interesting, isn't it? So this is where social media, because we talk about social media, people think Facebook, people think Twitter, people think LinkedIn. Social media actually means that there's contributors that are not the source. Okay. So when we talk about Uber, Uber doesn't own a taxi. Right? Uber is a channel that people can comment on someone else, and so this is what's going on with social media when we talk about making purchasing decisions.
Yeah, and I think that some of the people on the call might relate to this. But before, going to a meeting, whether it's a business meeting or a sales meeting or even applying for a job, quite often you'll Google the person that you're going to meet, and what you see at the other end of that search results can be quite important. And more often than not, the LinkedIn profile would be coming up number 1. Yep. And in that scenario, in that circumstance, it is more important than your website of your business, because that's what people are going to see first. Yeah. So it's very important that you're portraying what are the key points that you do differently and why you're passionate about what you do, and build your personal brand. When they come through to your LinkedIn profile, because if it's just a version of your CV, then it's probably not going to do a good job of helping give that first impression.
It's funny you say that, because the reverse is true. If I Google someone who I'm looking to have a meeting with, and I go to their LinkedIn profile and there's no picture, or there's nothing in there, or it's very thin on the ground, it actually causes doubt for me as to how up to date they are, how clear they are about who they are and what they do, what are they hiding. So there's almost an expectation that if you're in the public eye, if you're in B2B, you need to be available in a format that people expect.
Okay, so this brings us back to the point that I mentioned earlier.
Yep.
7 is the average number of key influencers in a B2B purchase.
Yeah, what does that mean, Nathaniel?
Well, it means that 7 people in the organisation will influence a purchasing decision.
Wow.
So rather than just going, well, okay, I want to target Commonwealth Bank, I'm going to message the CEO and see what happens, there's probably going to be, in Commonwealth Bank, probably more like 50 decision makers. And so if you have a holistic approach, they could be talking about you in the coffee room in their morning tea break.
Right. So this is almost going back to the good old days of account management 101. Where if we're dealing with a larger organisation, we've got to make sure we've got relationships up and down the tree. Okay, we can't rely on one contact in an organisation to push our service or our product through. What we need to be doing is we need to be connecting at all different levels, and that's how we can make sure all the decision makers or all the influencers. Because sometimes it's not obvious. Sometimes it's someone like a secretary who really has no station of power as far as a title goes, but they are a big influencer.
So it makes sense, guys, to target a specific niche. If you're in B2B, target a specific industry. If you don't have a target industry, get one. Because once you start to get this critical mass, these key influencers will just join your network by default, because you're going to have so many connections in common in that industry, and so you'll get this economies of scale happening. So really important point is to target specific niche.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, so B2B buyers are 5 times more likely to engage with sales professionals via warm introductions than cold outreach.
Okay.
I mean, this is pretty self-explanatory, but we all know that the cold calling days are numbered. The conversion rate last time I checked was 1%. When you're trying to get through to people these days, if it's a private number or they don't recognise the number, they don't answer. If they do answer, it's not the decision maker, etc., etc., etc. Whereas what you're doing on LinkedIn is you're actually just making a touch point, and they'll look at it when it's convenient to them. And you don't have to push what your pitch is and who you are, if necessarily in your connection request or in your message, because don't forget, like, your profile's only a click away. So if that's set up correctly, then that should do the job for you. It's a very different concept than trying to explain who you are and what you do in 30 seconds on a telephone.
Okay, so you're really lowering the barrier to entry just by actually having a bit of background on the person you're making contact with, which you can't do on a phone unless you talk to a secretary first, or do the research online. With LinkedIn, you're going straight into someone's profile and then making a connection.
Okay, so just some more statistics here. These are all straight from LinkedIn's Sales Navigator website. 51% more likely to exceed quota if you are social selling. You know, promoted to VP 17 months later, get promoted faster, go to Club, which is in the US, what they do to reward salespeople. So first and foremost, before you start connecting and trying all these different approaches, you need to really know where you're going. So it's all very well trying to think what's going to work for certain outcomes, but unless you know what the ideal outcome is, it's hard to strategize effectively, because what we're going to talk about in a minute is key performance measures. So we need to start with strategy. So what is it that you're trying to achieve? And I think for most people on the call, it would be sales revenue. So what I'd like everyone to do, whether you've got the workbook in front of you or not, is just jot down a figure of how much sales revenue you'd like to achieve from social media over the next 12 months. Because what we're going to do is actually work these figures back and work out what you need to do on a monthly basis to achieve that outcome.
And it's pretty key. I think starting with the end in mind is really the best way to get a result out of social media. So it's not about how many connections you have. It's not about how much time you spend on there. It's about whether it turns into a sale, I suppose, ultimately.
That's right, yeah. Of countless times I've had somebody tell me, you know, I've got 5,000 connections on LinkedIn, as if it's, you know, that's the answer, or that's the holy grail. Your number of connections really is irrelevant if you're not getting any revenue in the bank. Same thing as if you're getting 55 likes on your Facebook post and no revenue. It's exactly the same thing. People are quite keen on measuring things like this. Even where they rank you in terms of how many people are viewing your profile. And people say, well, I'm the number one in my network. Well, all that tells me is your network must be pretty poor. If you're the most viewed out of everyone within your network, you should probably be connecting with people that are a bit more visible. Yeah,
and it's similar to that thing. You know, when you talk to someone who's in business and you say, how's it going? And they say they're busy. You know, busyness doesn't mean making money. Busyness just means I'm busy. So we can have the same thing, and I've watched this with social media. People get online and they're posting and they're posting and they're posting, and when you ask the hard question, which is how much money are you making out of this, they can't quantify. And maybe they think they're getting traction because they're building likes or they're building connections, but you're exactly right. If there's no conversion between one stage and the next stage, it just becomes a fruitless effort.
That's right, yeah. So if you know what your target is, and let's say for argument's sake it's $1 million, and your average sales 50 grand, and you need to hit 20 sales over the course of the next 12 months. So it's pretty straightforward, and we can work the figures back from there.
Excellent.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about personal brand, because the way that you market on LinkedIn is very personal. Like I said, it's people-to-people marketing. So what people are looking for is that personal touch, and they don't necessarily need to know where you started your career and what, like all the different intricacies of what you did at each place that you worked. What they want to know is why you do what you do.
Yep.
And so if you can portray the passion in your profile, particularly in the summary at the start, then you'll actually have a much higher conversion rate than if you just explain a bit about your role.
Yeah, and it's funny because we talk about first impressions as well, and I don't know exactly what the saying is about first impressions, but I think it takes 3 seconds to make a first impression and 3 years to erase it. I look at people's profile, and what I see immediately is usually what I get stuck with. And this is why I was mentioning before about photos and things. If I don't see a photo of a person, if I see a photo of either a blank, so the template, the generic one, or a photo of a logo or something, I'm straight away going, why is this person hiding? This is a personal profile. This is meant to be about them. Mm-hmm. And people do like to know about you, and they also want to know why you do things. So the other thing that bores me to tears on a profile is when people tell you things about their business. They tell you, their corporate story. I'm not a big fan of corporate profiles because I've never seen one where people have negative comments in their corporate profile. Mm-hmm. It always tells you, that they exceed client expectations and they are the best in the industry. And so a story about why you do things is much more inspiring. You picked a really great quote here, Simon Sinek. I don't know if people can see that on the screen, but Simon Sinek wrote a book called Starting With Why. And in his book, he talks about it's not about what you do, but why you do it. and he's got a brilliant TED Talks video. If people want to search him out on Google and find his video on TED Talks, Simon Sinek. But it really inspires you to think about why you do things and use that as part of your profile. So great quote there.
You look at the most engaging person on LinkedIn, publisher since day dot, is Richard Branson, and he's got this down to a T. He just had his 65th birthday a couple of days ago, actually. But personal branding, he's absolutely nailed it. So why you do what you do, explain a little bit about your personality. When you get into your experience section on your LinkedIn profile, that's when you can go into a bit of detail about the company and what their values are.
Yep.
Okay, so now we're going to actually give you some pointers for optimizing your LinkedIn profile, and these are really just a handful out of all the things that you can do. There's when we optimize LinkedIn profiles, we've got a 22-step checklist that we go through. So it's quite detailed, but these are some of the key things. And if you do these things, you will show up in the search results higher, and hopefully on Google you could be #1, depending on how competitive your industry is and your name is. So the first thing, obviously, profile photograph is the most important part. Optimize your headline. So where you've got your job title showing up, that's what people are going to see in the search results. That's the most important place for keywords. So you want to make sure that whatever you've got in there are things that people might search for. So if you're an accountant in Melbourne, there might be a good idea to have accountant Melbourne in there. Just bear in mind that people are more likely to search for things like accountant rather than accounting, for example. So people are looking for individuals. The next component is to add connections. Now, the way that LinkedIn works is when you search for people, the first people you see are your first connections, and then you see all of their connections. So the easiest way to get more visibility is to have more connections. Now, it doesn't mean you go off and connect with people that have no bearing of influence on your target market, that are based overseas and quite often trying to sell you search engine optimization. It means that you build your network, quality network, within target demographic. Okay. Now, the LinkedIn web address down the bottom there, they call it your vanity URL. It's where you can actually customize the address that people type in to find your LinkedIn profile. It's quite an important part to optimize if you want to show up in Google search results. This is one of the big parts of Google's search engine algorithm, is to look at the URL, and if that has your first and second name in it, then you're more likely to show up #1 in the search results when people are searching for your name.
Yep. Okay. So I mean, these are very pointed sort of areas. Now, can I just dive in on connections a little bit, because I think we were discussing before the webinar this whole notion of connecting with people, and I always sort of equate this to this onion. Sort of there's different skins, and there's layers, and what you just identified is start by connecting to the people you know, and then go through the people who are in your circle of influence. So this might be any clubs that you're a member of, any associations you're a member of, local community figureheads, all those sorts of people, and start building these connections, because as you connect with more, then I think the list of people who you see grows as well, right?
That's right, yeah. And just another piece of inside information, I suppose. I don't think that it's going to become any easier, and it probably will become harder to connect with people that you don't necessarily know. You'll notice that sometimes LinkedIn will ask you for an email address in order to connect. So I think that it's quite important that you get onto this right now and build your social database so that you can, leverage off it for years to come.
Yeah, because I suppose it's like email. People are not that quick to give out an email address anymore, because they're onto it and they're saying, well, if I give out an email address, I'm going to get spammed. Most people, if they see that you're sending email without an unsubscribe, they can shut you down, lock you out. It's all over. LinkedIn, I think, is happening the same way. Like you said, there's a lot of companies that are coming in from other countries trying to sell you stuff on LinkedIn. So you think you're popular, but they're sales pitches. There's a point in time where you go, that's it. If I don't know the person, I'm not going to connect. And I don't think it's that far away. So getting in now before that sort of becomes the standard, I think would be pretty key.
Yeah. I mean, this is really, you could call it social selling, but the selling's always done offline. It's really just networking.
Yeah.
This is just the same as going down to your local business networking evening on a Friday night, but, I guess you could call it networking on steroids.
And online, right? Okay, so the iceberg, one of my favourite pictures of the iceberg.
So this represents your first degree connections on LinkedIn. Okay, so that's actually not where the opportunity is necessarily. Where the opportunity lies is below the top of the ocean, where you've actually got a huge opportunity to connect with people that are in your second degree of connections.
So can you explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit like when you go to see a really happy client after a year or two, and you want to ask him for referrals.
Yep.
And he scratches his head, and he might think of one or two names, and maybe he gives you their phone number, maybe they don't. What you can do on LinkedIn is you can actually see all of his network, pick out the clients that would be suitable for your business, and you could go to your client with a list of 50 people and say, I'd like introductions to all of these people. Would you be able to help me out? That's in a nutshell what LinkedIn gives you the possibilities to achieve.
Right. Okay, so that's quite powerful just in its own right. So the traditional referral strategy would be to ask. And if you ask someone for a referral, the standard answer is, I can't think of anyone right now, but I'll keep you in mind, which means I won't keep you in mind. I just can't think of anyone right now. What you're saying is I can now go into someone's phone book, basically, in LinkedIn, see all of their contacts, read their profiles, pick out the ones that I think I should be introduced to, come back to you and say, look, I was looking through the connections you've got. These 5 people here, would you introduce me? Which is a totally different question to, do you know anybody who needs my service?
Yeah, that's right. And when you do send that person a connection request, if that's the way you decide to do it, and you say, hey, John, I've noticed that we've got 4 or 5 different connections in common, and I think we should have a chat. I think like that warm introduction is what we're going back to before with that statistics, 5 times more likely to be effective than approaching someone cold.
Right. So I would call this a proactive referral. And, it's one of the things I encourage people to do a lot of, and social media actually lends itself to this, is this ability to not just ask for the name of someone who needs your service, but actually start building networks through your connections, so this second level.
Correct. Okay, so reach the right people. Quite often what I find is on LinkedIn, because there's so many different decision makers, you've got to make sure that you're approaching the right people. And one of the easy ways to just make sure you are touching the right person is to say, look, I wanted to chat to somebody in the organisation about this. Are you the right person, or could you put me in touch with the right person to speak to?
Yeah.
By doing that, then you make sure you connect with the right people. So that's quite important. Also, you can, in the LinkedIn Advanced search feature, you can get quite granular with the people that you target. And so, like, if you're going to look at company size, for example, if they've got 1 to 10 employees, the decision-making cycle will always be a lot quicker than if they've got, say, over 10,000 employees. So you don't want to go going off into new territory which you haven't done in your business before. You want to target the people that you have had experience selling to.
Yeah.
Target industries which you're familiar with, where you know what the buying cycle's like.
Right.
And then have a sales process at the back end. Like, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they launch straight into lead generation without a sales process. And then after a couple of months, when they haven't got any sales, they say, well, the leads were rubbish, we need to start another completely different campaign on a different platform. Whereas, if you have a sales process, you can test and measure things from the get-go. And David, you're way more up to speed on this than I am.
This is my biggest bugbear, is that social media has created another layer of engagement. And it's a very low-level engagement. Because when you connect with someone online, it doesn't mean they're a lead. Right? It just means it's a connection. So where we used to think about leads as people who are interested in buying product or service, and your job was to convert them to clients, we've now got a layer above that, which is identifying people in a network, connecting with them, and converting them from a connection to a lead. Now, that is a sales process, and I've got an ebook that I use with clients to help them develop their sales process, and I'm going to get Ash to just pop that link up. If anyone wants to download it, it's just a simple book, but it walks you through the process of how to build your sales pipeline. Now, you need to be able to do this, because when you do connect with someone, and I've watched people do this, they make heaps of connections, but they have no idea what to do next, so they go for the jugular, and their next email or their next in-mail just kills the relationship, because it's a pitch, right? And this is really where we've got to be really careful, because like any social, and let's forget about social networks, like any social environment, when you connect with someone in a social environment, you don't pitch them, right? What you need to be doing is you need to be engaging, and I think engagement really requires a bit of thought process so that you don't get too sort of in their face, okay? And what I mean by that is, let's start by understanding a bit more about them. right? Let's start by understanding a bit more about how we can actually either help them or support them without selling them anything. And so it still requires, even though it's not a sale at this point, it requires a sales process to get that engagement from a connection to someone who shows some interest in the product or service.
Yeah, I mean, it's more important than ever now to have the mindset of just adding more value than your competitors in order to be successful. And it's just no different than a like a personal relationship, or I don't know if anyone's ever been on a date with somebody either where they just talk about themselves all night. It normally doesn't go very far, but it's so different in business relationships.
Yeah, and the old saying of being interested rather than interesting. I think once you make that initial connection, you've actually got to show a level of respect for the person who's allowed you to connect, and you've got to show a level of almost intimacy, if you want to call it that, if you want to use the metaphor of the relationship. You've actually got to have enough common sense to sort of consider them and where they're at, or what their issues are, or what their profile is, or what their job is. So it's not about you, right? And it's a really difficult thing to get through people's heads, is stop trying to pitch, right? Because in this situation, when people have said, I'm happy to have a conversation, they don't want to hear your pitch. If they want to hear your pitch, they jump online and they type in your product or service, and they have high buyer intent, they'd go straight to your website. In the social networks, they are interested in having a connection. They're looking for some commonalities. They want to know what you do on the weekend. They want to know maybe whether there's some sort of synergy in just having a chat.
So like a lot of our clients are in financial services, and they might target real estate agents or accountants because they've got the same client base.
Yeah.
And so they're thinking, okay, well, their client base would be perfect for me. And so the wrong thing to do is say, hey, I'd like to be introduced to your client base, because I want to build my clients up. What the right thing to do is say, hey, I've actually got some clients that I think would suit you, and I'd like to talk about how I might be able to give you some referrals. And when you make that shift, the conversion rate starts to give astronomical results. And in the former example I gave, where you're talking all about yourself, it just actually won't work.
No.
And you'll end up pigeonholing LinkedIn as one of those online marketing platforms that isn't successful.
Yeah. Now, when we talk about online marketing platforms, the success of the platform should be measured in how many of your target market are on it, not your ability to convert those, because that's really you and not the platform. So when we do talk about this whole responsibility, there's a saying I use often, which is true communication is the response you get. And if you're putting emails out on any media, I don't care if it's LinkedIn or even email, and people aren't responding, chances are you're not giving them the right information, or you're not asking the right questions, or you're not engaging at that right level.
Well, I noticed one of the things with Google advertising, like when you get an inquiry, generally it could be one of the admin people or marketing manager, but it's not necessarily the guy that's calling all the shots. So your message is going through one or two different gatekeepers before it even gets to the decision maker.
Yeah.
So like when I get inquiries now through Google, I straight onto LinkedIn, I find out who the decision maker is, and I connect with them.
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to influence that decision-making process, make sure that they've got the facts direct from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And this is the sort of thing that LinkedIn's really effective for.
Yeah. Yes. So the ability to do that research in the background, because doing it on the phone is difficult. When you ring up a company and you talk to the gatekeeper and you say, I'm looking for the decision maker, and they start blocking you. Who is it? What's it about? I'll tell you whether you can get through the decision maker. Online, you can do the research. You can throw a connection in without having to talk to a gatekeeper, as long as you've got the right engagement model. And this is really coming down to making sure there's an easy next step.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, another thing. Your competitors won't be doing this.
Yep.
So it's a huge point of difference. Like the people have not caught on in Australia yet. Like there's a big lag between these states and here. And a lot of people are still wondering how to use LinkedIn effectively. So if you master this now, like you've just got a massive competitive edge in the marketplace.
Yeah.
All right. So the goal really should be to get new connections within your target demographic. You can do that through content or sending customized connection requests. Don't send the standard connection request. You want to stand out from the crowd. Your brand's worth more than that. And email and email. So once you've got the connection, then we can start looking at what might be the strategy to generate a lead.
So let's assume when you get the connection, it's like getting past the gatekeeper. Because all that really means is I have a direct channel to that person. What I send in these emails going back and forward is my 3 seconds where I actually need to impress him or lose the connection.
Yeah, and it shifts from being like an outbound lead to like an inbound lead, because they've just accepted your connection request, which means they've kind of approved that you might be in touch as part of their network in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so once you've got the connection, you want to go through a process of engagement. So find, connect, engage is really the holistic view that you should be taking. Find the right people, focus on connecting with them, and then engaging in discussion. Now, what we found is by trialing and testing different kinds of messaging and sequences and scripts and all that kind of thing as to how we can actually generate a lead, is that the most effective approach is actually to do similar to what you do in email marketing and have it like a drip campaign where you're actually having multiple touch points with your target market. And it could be a series of content and posts and articles that you're publishing, which they're going to see in the news feed, and in between actual making direct response touch points with private messages. So, for example, if somebody becomes a new connection, you may have seen some people write these thank you notes to say thank you for connecting with me. As part of my network, I'd like to offer you a complimentary ebook. If you ever need any help or introductions, feel free to contact me. It's quite a friendly way to just say, hey, welcome to my network, and you're not actually asking for anything in that message. And then it may be that they see some content from you, and then maybe a couple of weeks later you say, hey, do you know what I was actually thinking? That you could be a good fit for our business, and maybe we should have an offline discussion or a coffee or something like that. And that sort of approach is very effective, and we actually see the more touch points you make, the conversion rate increase every time.
And this comes down to this whole engagement process, because I think people get the find and connect. It's sort of pretty straightforward. Identify your target market, do the searches on LinkedIn, start putting connection requests out there. Now, if you use generic ones, you'll have a lower conversion. If you use customized ones, you'll have a high conversion. This engagement part, I think people are struggling with. It's not your typical engagement like a lead, which is inbound, where people are saying, hey, I'm interested in your product, come and pitch it to me. It's an engagement from, hey, I'm willing to open the door and let you have a conversation with me. What value can you bring to the table? And that's where the challenge lies, because welcoming someone to your network is key. Think about what's happened in retail. Traditionally, if you walk in a retail store, the first thing that the retail sales rep should do is say, hi, can I help you? Now, we are almost automated in the response, no thanks, just looking. I don't know if you do this. Sometimes I'll say that even though I do want help, because it's just so automated. Because I don't want to be sold. So if you go to a more modern shop, you'll realize that no one asks that question anymore. What they do is they walk straight past you and they just say, hi, how you going? And what they're saying is, I don't want to ask you if I can help you, because you might say no. I'm going to say, how you going? Because if you want help, you've got the opportunity to come back to me. This is what we're talking about here, is having this conversation going back and forward. So if the person is interested, let them have the opportunity to ask.
So this is some statistics here on how the conversion rate increases with multiple touch points. So you can see just accelerating every time you make another touch point, the conversion rate goes up. For those of you that got the workbook in front of you, these are the 9 keys that we've covered today to social selling. Build a personal, professional brand, target a niche using advanced search, engage correctly. As David said, it's not about you. Build a network of raving fans, and this really leads into industry leadership, and measure your success along the way.
We'll cover that in a minute, because I think the measurement of conversion through different stages is critical. So we'll go through those models in just a moment. The next one you got there is bring the conversation offline. And I think this is pretty key, because we keep assuming that social media is its own isolated entity, and it's not that at all. It's a way of reaching out and finding people. The quicker you can get into a face-to-face conversation with someone, the better, right? Because people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And the best way to sell, and it's never going to change, is face-to-face. Get that conversation offline, see if you can start talking human to human, and you can get that engagement going.
Yeah, that's a very big point. Yeah, absolutely. And if people are firing questions back at you about your services and your products, just lead it into a telephone call or a meeting, and pull that conversation off of social media as soon as possible.
Yeah. And look, the next point: have a clear and easy next step. Don't try and pitch product to someone who's not ready to buy, but give them something that they can do. It could be, look, I just want to catch up for a quick chat on the phone for a couple of minutes before you start pushing them into a meeting. It might be, I want you to just have a look at this ebook that we've written, or I might want you to check out some pricing on our website. But if you're not getting conversion from one step to the next, and this is why you need a sales process, usually it's the step before that you're asking too much. Okay? That's usually what's going on. So we have to reduce the barrier to engage from one step to the next and make it easy. Last one here, number 8's an interesting one, qualifying the prospect, because if we do open up the floodgates on social media, we can end up with thousands of connections, and we can end up with thousands of people we're talking to which are of no value. And this is the danger, because unless you're qualifying all the way through, and what I mean by qualifying is identifying that they are the decision maker, making sure that the target market or the size of the company is confirmed, and making sure they actually have a need for your product. Now, qualifying to me means asking questions. Okay? Because if I don't ask questions, I don't know. Now, questions could be direct or they could be indirect. Indirect means looking at the profile and asking the question, is this the right person?
Yeah, and when you're qualifying people on social media, like the first thing you're going to do is identify that there's a need.
Yeah.
Now, quite often, the way the numbers work is you're going to get, like, if you message 100 people, generally you'll get about 15 or 20 people that respond that do have a need. And out of those people, once you speak to them on telephone, you'll find that about half of them are actually ready to do something about it now, and the other half, the timing's just not right. So you want to just qualify out that half that's not ready to do something, and then just nurture them, point number 9, until they are ready to do something. So that when they, come back to you, in 3 months' time, you haven't burned any bridges or anything like that, and you're the, authority in that particular area.
And this last point here, Nathaniel, having a nurturing process, and the key word in this is process, because I think what happens is often we make initial contact, we try and pitch and we fail, and then we really don't have a structured approach to keep in touch with people. And whether it's on some sort of regular email, whether it's a drip feed campaign, whether it's a phone call, you need to make sure that you have a process to keep the engagement going. You want to be top of mind when that need does come up.
Yeah.
So if that's not structured, it just falls into a big black hole.
Yeah, and once it's systemized, whether you can get technology to do it or you can outsource it, your time's not on social media, it's out seeing people. And I can tell you the most effective people on social media do not spend much time on there.
Yeah,
they're out doing things.
So they're using it to get the leads, they're putting the leads offline, and then they're going through their normal sales process.
Okay, so here's an example. The College for Adult Learning were kind enough to let me share these statistics with you. So we just went through basically a 3-step process: find, connect, engage, very similar to what we just discussed. There's 3 target markets there. One is hospitals and healthcare, another is food production, and another is non-for-profits. Because they're in the adult learning space, they're looking for HR managers.
Yep.
And so you can see from, example, 582 odd connection requests, you get about half of them that will say yes, I'll connect with you. And then from there, you might send them all a message, and then you see the conversion rates ranges from 23% all the way up to 42% response rate, which kept them busy for many, many months. So 122 leads in 30 days with that campaign.
Okay. Now, I will point out, when we talk about a lead here, we're moving from a connection request to a person who's interested in having a conversation.
Correct.
Okay. So this is, I think, a lot of people have this thing that these leads are basically people with a wallet out, with money in their hand, running at you to throw it at you. The key thing here is social media is going to give you people to connect to. Your job is to convert them from happy to talk to you to I'm ready to buy. So there needs to be a sales process in there to convert those leads actually into paying clients.
Correct. So I can imagine some of you wrote down that figure before of what your sales target might be, are starting to work out how you can actually achieve that through this mechanism. Do you know what your lead to sale conversion rate at the moment is? Look, I reckon that you should probably half it, because the half of people are not going to be, at the time, it's just not going to be right.
Yeah.
So if you're closing 20% at the moment, make it 10% and work your figures out on that.
Right.
Okay, again, this is the process that I would suggest you all go through before you start connecting and engaging, and that's really to build your profile, the personal brand like we discussed, come up with your strategy, start connecting, then engaging, and then at the end of each month, just measure your results. And the things you want to measure are how many connection requests am I sending out, what's the response rate been, how many messages have I sent, and what's been the response rate. And generally, we measure leads by whether or not the person provided their telephone number and said, yeah, why not, let's have a call. Every business is different, no business is the same, obviously, but that's the way that most B2B companies would measure success.
Right.
Okay, Peter Drucker, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So true, isn't it, David?
Absolutely. And this is really what we talked about now.
Yep.
There's a simple table here. It's also in the workbook that Nathaniel published. We've got to start measuring KPIs slightly differently. Because normally when we talk about sales, we're looking at leads, and we're looking at conversion from lead to appointment, appointment to proposal, proposal to sale. Okay. Here, what we're talking about is we're going to measure how many people you can find in a target market. Okay, and if we work backwards and we start with a sales goal, so Nathaniel asked you to write down what is the amount of money you want to be making out of your social media marketing strategy. Put the number in the bottom there. Okay, working backwards. So you mentioned something just then about the engagement and your engagement with someone giving you a phone number or saying I'm interested in having a conversation. Yeah. And if you already have a conversion rate on your current sales process, you need to halve it. If you're getting a 20%, 1 in 5 conversion right now, chances are this engagement is going to be a 1 in 10 conversion. And now you're starting to get a sense of the type of numbers that you need to actually engage with.
Yeah, that's right. And look, the cool thing is, like you look at AdWords, for example, people are typing in what you do. They're looking for, you know, a dentist in Toorak.
Yeah.
That's great, and they will have a need, but you can't pick and choose whether these people have a budget of $10,000 to spend or $100.
Yeah.
So with these leads that are coming through, the chances are the transaction size and the lifetime value of the client are going to be much higher. Mm-hmm. And we found that it's actually just as effective to target like the big boys, like the banks and all that kind of stuff, than it is, you know, your small accountancy practices and that sort of thing. I guess the only main difference that you have to be aware of is the decision-making cycle is going to be a little bit longer, and that's expected. But in terms of reaching the key decision makers, it works just as effectively.
Okay. So to be successful in marketing on LinkedIn, we need to know what these numbers are.
Yep.
We need to have an expectation of what we're aiming for.
Yep.
Because sometimes people get put off by the raw numbers. Because I'm guessing what would be the typical connection rate, and you've had experience with a number of people doing this, Nathaniel. What sort of what's the rate of connection that people need to be achieving to see sales coming out the other end at a reasonable rate?
Well, you should be, out of the requests that you send out, you should be getting at least half of the people accept within 30 days. Keep in mind that some people will accept, you know, further down the track.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so if you're sending out, I've got the examples here on the workbook of, you know, 500
yep.
Connection requests, 250 people accept, and then say you've got a 10% conversion rate to lead, that's 25 leads that you've got there.
Yep.
Okay, and then if your conversion rate to sales 20%, okay, that's 5 sales, multiply that by 12, or 60 sales per year. And you can imagine that if you're just increasing the volume every month, how that can just skyrocket. So this can absolutely transform a business. You can scale a business extremely quickly. One of the questions I often get asked is, what's the limitation? There is no limitation. The more you connect with people, the more people you're going to see in your search results.
Yeah.
And so this really leads on to next steps, like how do you go about implementing all of this? So David and I have put together a workshop that's coming up, and we're going to go through how to actually set all of this up. And the other thing is we're going to talk about those nurturing campaigns and what you can actually do in terms of content to leverage off of everything else that you're doing. And there's no point us, you know, posting on Facebook and posting on LinkedIn and posting on Twitter when you can actually just synchronize all of it. And there's a very specific way that you can post on LinkedIn to get engagement. And what happens with LinkedIn, I'll just give you a very, very quick tip. If you get 10% of the people that view your article on LinkedIn actually like it, generally that means that you'll actually get taken into one of what they call Pulse, which means that LinkedIn will start marketing your article. So you could jump from literally having 200 views to 200,000 in a couple of weeks. So mastering this can be extremely effective for your becoming an industry leader.
Okay, so I suppose what we're doing in the workshop is we're split into 2 components. Number 1 is understanding the technology of LinkedIn, making sure that you're optimizing your profile, making sure that you're optimizing your numbers of connections and the way you're connecting. The second part is designing a process that's actually the content that you would be using in each one of these engagements, because, you know, there's an old saying, you need 7 touch points with someone before they get to know, like, and trust you. I think that needs to happen earlier these days with social media. So we need to make sure that you're engaging. We need to make sure that it's in a structured way so we can measure the conversion from one stage to the next. So in my half of the workshop, I'm going to be covering that and helping people map out the process, create the artifacts, the components they need, whether it's scripts, whether it's pre-written emails, whatever it might be, so that we can start to put this marketing system in place.
That's right, yeah. That's right. So just like the goal is really to so you don't have to spend hours and hours on this, and just get it up and running so that you can spend more time in front of your clients.
Yeah.
So this is just some for people that have come along before. We've worked with all sorts of industries. The main ones which are going to have the best success rate are things like education, B2B, real estate, financial services. Anyone that has a high transaction size, this course is going to be for you. If you're in B2C, you might want to get in touch with me on LinkedIn and just see if it's appropriate or not, because it's definitely not for everyone.
Yep.
Okay, and there's a snap from the last one.
That's a nice one. Okay, so really a few details on the event. It's on the, what was the date?
It's August the 4th.
It's in the afternoon on August the 4th. It's a 2.5-hour workshop. We will be going through a lot of details. It's a Q&A session. We like to make sure people are walking out with an applicable plan that they can start working on that night. I think LinkedIn is something that, the window's open now to jump on board and to capitalise on it. It's one of those things, I think, when everyone's doing it, it's going to become less effective like telemarketing has these days. Mm-hmm. So for those people who see B2B as their target market, they actually know their target market, their clients, their decision makers are on LinkedIn. You need to start thinking about how you can optimize and how you can do that. Ash has put the link up, so it's on the right-hand side of your page. If you click on the link, you'll see the workshop. Now, I think we had a deal on as well, didn't we?
Yeah, when you go to the registration page, it's $297 to opt in. But if you type in the promotion code LinkedIn, just for people that are live on the webinar, you'll get a $100 discount. So that'll help you out. Get on your way if you're available to make it. If any of you do have any questions, I'm sorry we've run out of time, but we will endeavour to get through them all if you want to contact us individually.
Yep. Or if you post your questions into the chat box on the right-hand side after the webinar, we will get an email. We'll be able to respond to those as well.
Okay. But thanks everyone for your time, and enjoy this sunny Melbourne weather today.
Yes, and thanks Nathaniel for coming in and filling everyone in. I think this has been pretty useful for a lot of people.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers, guys.